Okay, so I think I've had an epiphany. I've been thinking about gravity, magnetism, and how to unify them for quite some time now. And I think this is also where mass comes from, and I think it's also what dark energy is pervasive to the universe. All right, check this out. So there's a zero mass particle made up of two components, let's call them X and Y for now, and they're pervasive and equilaterally distributed across the universe and almost like a plasma. Their interactive associative forces aren't strong enough for them to organize. However, when these things are condensed in enough to become mass, i.e. a planetary body P, they do. They're associated within mass, and they become organized and structured like a crystal. When they become organized and structured like a crystal, they associate and organize these things. They organize them in X's and Y's. So let's call it north and south. N equals X and Y equals S. So when these things are organized and associated, because there's an over-dense population of them in this association, they repel from the center of the P and they go out in radiance. I think the force created by the mass P, the planet, is a toroid form, which is why the symptom of the gravity or magnetism, the magnetism leaving the body, causing the magnetism, is observed almost like two fountains inverted against each other. Meanwhile, gravity, the planetary body P, is creating a void from all these things that it's organizing and expelling, and that void is gravity. It's collecting all these things and pulling it back into the vacuum that it's creating. That thing is gravity. Now, how I associate that with magnetism is for the longest time I had the hardest time trying to rectify how north repels north and south repels south, but south attracts north. So in the south condition, in the Y condition, down here, there's a huge density of these Y's associated and repelling against each other. Y, high density Y. And X, there's a high density X. So just like in osmosis, right? It travels from a high density to a low density. In this condition, the X condition, the north condition, there is an extremely high density of X. So X trying to enter another high density of X will not work because the density is too high per the space. Conversely, Y south entering a density of Y south the density is so high it doesn't want to enter into each other. However, the reason north and south attract is because the Y density is so high on the south and the X density is so high on the north that there is very little X in the Y density and there's very little Y in the X density. Therefore, it's almost a vacuum of the opposite pole, and they attract. This does suggest that gravity is less planar as suggested in the theory of relativity, and objects are not displacing items in time-space causing gravity. This would suggest that gravity is more Newtonian in nature. This is not to suggest that gravity is not relativistic. It is relativistic. It is completely relativistic based on the mass, size of the mass, density of the mass, etc. But it would suggest that gravity is less planar, inasmuch as it suggests in the theory of relativity is a distortion of the time-space continuum, the space-time plane, and more Newtonian. It would still allow for the deflection of photons, inasmuch as the gravitational field would affect the traveling path of the photons.